it's Mrs. Fellew. Today in third grade, we will be working on adding and subtracting two three-digit numbers. This is a skill you've been working on all year, and the tricky part of addition and subtraction is always regrouping. So for our focus today, we'll be regrouping the ones, tens, and hundreds place. For addition problems, sometimes we have to regroup ones and tens as digits above the tens and hundreds column. And for subtraction, we have to regroup the ones, tens, and hundreds, combining the differences to solve the problem. So today we will review a few strategies for addition and subtraction while regrouping in order to prepare to solve our 5 problems for the week. Once we have reviewed the strategies, I will walk through our 5 problems, solving them in different ways. These problems will require you to recognize and use a variety of strategies to add and subtract. You will also need to be familiar with base 10 blocks and writing 3-digit numbers in expanded form. So let's get started. So before we kind of get rolling with our problems today, we're going to look at some vocabulary that will be key in order to solve these problems. The first word is sum. So the definition of sum is the result of addition or the answer to an addition problem. For example, 2 plus 4 equals 6. 6 is our sum. So the difference is the result of subtraction, or the answer to a subtraction problem. So in our example, 6 minus 4 equals 2. 2 is the difference of 6 and 4. Okay, and notice how in the 2 example problems we talked about 2, 4, and 6. These are fact families and these work together, okay, showing the relationship between addition and subtraction. And how I can use addition to solve subtraction, and I can use subtraction to help me solve addition, and of course to help me check my answer. So the next one is place value. That's the value assigned to the digit based on the position in the number. So looking at this place value chart that we have here, remember where your hundreds, tens, and ones are, okay? And think about also your place value blocks and what they look like. So for hundreds, we had our big squares. For tens, we had the rods, and ones, we had the small little squares. So the 8 in 386 is in the tens place, which means it has the value of 8 tens or 80, okay? And finally, to regrouping, and that's going to be our big focus today. Regrouping is to compose or decompose ones, tens, and hundreds, okay? 10 ones can be regrouped as 110, or that one rod, and 100 can be regrouped as 10 tens. So if we're having to subtract, and we can break and decompose some of these numbers to help us, or we can put these together to help us with addition and subtraction. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a few example problems before we begin our 5 problems of the week. Okay, so let's take a look at this problem. Garcia has 130 trading cards. Mark has 280 trading cards. How many cards do Garcia and Mark have together? So for this problem, I know I'm going to be adding because I'm combining 2 totals to find out how much they have together. So let's take a look at this in place value blocks and kind of review what it really means or looks like to regroup. So this is the model that shows how much Garcia has. So you can see she has 100, and then she has 3 tens, which gives her 130. And then Mark, we see has 200s and then 8 tens or 80, so he has 280. So I can just take these place value blocks and put them all together, giving me this right here. However, I have 11 tens when I just put them all together. So I can't really have 11 in that tens place. So we're going to have to do a little bit of regrouping. So we're going to regroup these 11 tens as 100 plus 10. Okay. So we're going to be adding 400s plus a 10, giving us 410. So the total of these trading cards would be 410. Okay. So let's take a look at another way to solve this, because we don't really have place value blocks in our house. So what can we do? So one thing you could do is you could break apart the number. Okay, so when you look at 130, I went ahead and broke it up into 100 and then 30. And then I had a 0 here in the ones place because I just didn't have any ones blocks. And then I also took 280 and I broke it apart into 280. Okay, so of course when I add up my place value, here I have 0 plus 0 equals 0. I don't have anything in the ones place. And so here in this one, in the tens place, I have a 30 plus 80, which gave me 110. So I have 11 tens. And then in the hundreds place, I have 100 plus 200, which gives me 300. So one thing I could do is I could give 100 to my hundreds place, leaving me with 400 plus 10 plus 0, which gives me 410. I could also do it just a little bit differently. I'm using partial sums. Again, it's very similar. I had 0 ones, I had 110 tens, and I had 300, or I had 3 hundreds, 300, which gave me 410. So these are kind of two different ways, but notice how they're very, very similar when I solved it. So, all right, let's take a look at a subtraction problem. So, Luke has 205 seeds. He plants 137. How many seeds does he have left? Okay, so of course I know I'm going to be using subtraction because I'm talking about how many seeds does he have left. So, and I know he's planted some of them. So what I did here is I used break apart, which was similar to what we did with addition. But we're going to have to regroup in different place values. So I took 205 and I broke it apart into 205, and I didn't have anything in my tens place, so I left it as a 0. And then I broke up my 137 into 130 and 7. So as I begin subtracting this, I realized I can't take 7 from 5 and I can't take 30 from 0. So I needed to do a little bit of regrouping. So I went to my hundreds place and I took away 100, leaving that as 100 and giving 100 to the tens place. Then I gave 10 of that 100 to my ones place, leaving my regrouping as 100, 90, and 15. So from there, I can begin subtracting. So 15 minus 7 gives me 8, and 90 minus 30 gives me 60. And remember, I've got to combine those differences there. So I have to combine the 60 and the 8, which left me with 68. So that's one way we can solve it with subtraction. But this is one of my favorite ways to subtract. I'm not the biggest fan of subtraction, so anytime I can add on to subtract, I'm all about it. So what I've done here is I've used an open number line, and I started with 137, and I'm going to count up to 205. So what I did is I started at 137, and I made a jump to 140, okay, because 140 is a friendly number for me. And I knew that was a jump of 3, so I recorded 3 above my jump. And then I went from 140 to 200, recording that jump as 60. And then I went from 200 to 205 and recorded it as 5. Okay, but my work's not done just yet. So I had to take the 60 and the 3 and the 5 and add it together to get my difference of 68. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at some examples and we've talked about some strategies and things that we can keep in mind, now we're going to look at your 5 problems for the week. So I'm going to read each question, and if you're watching on the computer, after I've read the question, you could pause and try and work it yourself. If you're watching it on the TV, maybe you'll have time to go back and try and solve it a different way than me. Okay, so looking at question 1. 3 friends are keeping track of their reading this fall. The table shows the number of pages each person has read. So I'm looking at this table over here, and I see Beatrice, Roy, and Caleb. And here are the number of pages that they read. So I will have to refer back to this table for each one. It says choose true or false for each statement. So this isn't just one problem. There's actually 4 problems in here that I need to solve. So let's take a look at A. So looking at Beatrice and Roy, they have a combined total of 473. So I know I'm going to be adding. So I'm going to take what Beatrice read and what Roy read, and I'm going to add them together. So what I did up here is I used the break apart strategy. So I took the 200 plus 70 plus 4, and then 100 plus 90 plus 9, and then I added from there. So I have 4 and 9 gives me 13. So I left the 3 ones here, and I gave the 10 to the tens place. So 10 plus 70 plus 90, okay, gave me 170. So I left the 70 in the tens place, and I moved the 100 over to the hundreds place, giving me 100 plus 200 plus 100 gives me 400. So when I look back at my original problem, I see that it says that they have read 473 pages combined. That would be true based on my break apart strategy. Okay, let's take a look at B. It says Roy and Kayla have read 404 pages combined. So again, I'm hearing that word combined. We're adding 2 totals together. So I am going to use partial sums on this one to see if they are correct. So I said 9 plus 5 gives me 14. And 90 plus 0 gives me 90. And then 100 plus 200 gives me 300. So when I add all of these together, I have the 4 in the ones place. A 1 plus 9 gives me a 10. So I had to put the 0 here and carry that little 1, or carry that 100 over. And then 100 plus 300 gives me that 400. So 404 is the correct answer, which means that B would be true. Okay, so moving on to C, it says Kayla has read 91 more pages than Roy. So as I look up here with Kayla and Roy, I noticed that 199 and 205 are actually very close together. And I think 91 might be a bit much to have the difference. So, but let's still take a look at this. So I used an open number line again, adding on to subtract. So I went from 199 to 200, which I recorded that jump as a 1. And then from 200 to 205, I recorded that jump as 5, adding up those differences to get the difference of 6. So C would be false. Let's take a look at D. D says Beatrice has read 79 more pages than Kayla. So again, I'm trying to find the difference between Beatrice and Kayla. So I used, again, the break apart strategy. I have 200 plus 70 plus 4 and 200 plus 0. There's nothing in the tens place there, plus 5. So I knew I couldn't take 5 from 4, so I went to the tens place. So I changed the 70 to a 60 and changed this 4 to a 14. 14 minus 5 equals 9, and 60 minus 0 equals 60, giving me the difference of 69. So looking back at D, it looks as though that would be false as well, because the actual answer would be 69. Okay, moving on to question 2. Explain how you can start with 470 and add on to solve. So again, using one of my favorite strategies, adding on to subtract, you can start with 470. And I made a jump of 30, which gives me right to 500. And that was just a friendly number that made sense to me. And then, of course, I have one more jump, giving me 30 plus 1, giving me 31. So that's one way you can add on to solve. Okay, so looking at question 3. At the recycling fair, 193 glasses of orange juice and 270 glasses of lemonade were sold. How many more glasses of lemonade were sold than glasses of orange juice? So when I'm thinking about this problem, I'm realizing I'm trying to figure out the difference between the number of glasses of lemonade and the number of glasses of orange juice. So I'm going to be subtracting in this problem. And so for this problem, I use the break apart strategy. You could have also used the open number line or add to subtract if you wanted to, but I was just trying something different. So let's take a look at this problem here. What I did is I broke apart the 200, the 70, and the 0, and the 100, the 90, and the 3. And noticing pretty quickly that I couldn't subtract 3 from 0 and I couldn't take away 90 from 70. So I really had to go over to my 200 and take one of those hundreds and put it into my tens place, leaving my my hundreds place as 100. And then my tens place then becomes 160. Or it would be 170. And then I needed to give 10 to my tens place. So I have regrouped this number as 100 plus 160 plus 10. So then I can begin subtracting. So when I subtract, my differences are 70 and 7, and then I put it together for 77. So the difference of the glasses of orange juice and lemonade would be 77 in this problem. Okay, so question 4. I again solved it very similar, just using that break apart strategy. So I broke apart the number 600, 30 and 6, and then the 150 and 8. Okay. So what I had to do here is I realized pretty quickly that I couldn't take 8 from 6 and I couldn't take 50 from 30. So I took 100 from my 600, leaving it 500, and I gave it to my tens place. Okay. But I gave it to my tens place. But I realized my ones place also needed a little bit of that. So I regrouped this number as 500 plus 120 plus 16, giving me my combined difference of 478. Okay, so moving on to question 5. That's our last question. It says, which of these diagrams or solutions represents 113 plus 168? Circle all the correct answers. So, before I start solving all of these problems, I need to figure out what the sum of 113 plus 168 actually is. So what I did is I used partial sums. So I said 3 plus 8 gives me 11, and 10 plus 6 gives me 70, and 100 plus 100 gives me 200. So with the combined total or sum would be 281. So in order for these to have the same solutions, they have to equal 281. So let's take a look at A, and here are our place value blocks again. So what I did is I just added up the hundreds, tens, and ones. So just at first glance at A, I already see 3 hundreds there. So I already know that that's probably too high. So because we ended up having 300 plus 80 plus 8 tens or 80, and then 11 ones, which gives us 391. So it's 100 over what we actually needed. So A would not be a correct answer. All right, let's take a look at B. And I did it a very similar way. We have the 100 here, and we have 170 in our tens place, and then we have 11 ones. So when I added it up, I got a total of 281. So B would be a correct answer. All right, so let's take a look at C. So I went ahead to solve C and compared my answers, and I noticed that we were a 10 off because here they said 3 plus 8 equals 1, but they didn't regroup in the tens place, okay? So they are going to be a 10 off. So C would not work. So looking at D, they added it up very similar how I did at the beginning. So we have 11 and 70 and 200, which gives us 281. So D would work. So let's take a look at E. So when I did E, I noticed again we had the same issue that we had with C where we were a 10 off. They said that 3 ones plus 8 ones equals 1 1, which we know that should be 11 ones. So they were just a bit off. So E would not work. Okay, so before we close out our video today, let's look at a quick challenge question. Arrange the digits in these boxes that you see here, digits 1 through 6, into 2 3-digit whole numbers. Make the sum as close to 1,000 as possible. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and you're going to put them in these boxes, arrange them in a different way. You can't repeat any numbers to try to see if you can get to 1,000. as close to 1,000 as possible without going over 1,000. So, just a hint, which digits will be the most helpful to focus on to make the solution as close to 1,000 as possible? So think about your hundreds, your tens, and your ones and what you need to have in those in order to get as close as you can. Remember, regrouping might be key here. And I'll go ahead and give you the answer. For those of you who are on the computer, you can pause it. I'll give you the answer. It is 993 is the largest sum that you could get without going over. However, there are multiple ways. So I challenge you to try and rearrange those numbers to find another way to get that. So, as always, thanks for tuning in. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you guys next week.